From Cali to Tally, it's time to wake up. WarChant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source, and this is Wake Up War Chant. Now here's WarChant.com's Aslan Hudjavandi and Corey Clark.
What's up, everybody? If you're hearing this right now, this is going to act as the entire Wake Up War Chant podcast for Wednesday, so wake up. I know Florida plays Florida State in baseball, but who wants to talk about a loss? They haven't played the game yet, but we're just projecting. Pause for editing. So, yeah, they did play. Florida State was even leading, heading into the seventh inning 2-1 after Mike Salvatore's two-run homer put them ahead. But they lost 4-2. They struck out 10 times. They left 9 guys on base, and they had 3 errors, 4-2 loss. That's now what I think is the 10th straight loss to Florida in baseball and the 15th loss in the last 16 against Florida. But hey, it wasn't televised, so nobody had to witness it. And Mike Martin gets one last crack at the Gators later on to stop this atrocity. We're going to also project to the future here this weekend, Sweet 16 weekend. Corey Clark here with me, as always. Corey, how are you, friend?
I'm good, buddy. I am good.
All right, very well. So last week we had a really good spirited conversation with Dalen Cuff from ESPN. He's their college basketball analyst, does a really great job. I thought you did a fantastic job last week, Dalen. But there were some things that our fan base, we have a very unique fan base, Dalen. Florida State has won national titles in all sorts of different sports. They're in the Sweet 16 for a second straight year. But there's this weird sort of inferiority or paranoia that ESPN and people of your ilk conspire against Florida State. No love, no respect. Have you reassessed your thoughts at all about Florida State's basketball program after one weekend in March?
Not at all, but I do like the fact that your fan base may just lump us all together as ESPN.
Yes.
Ironically, we all have individual thoughts and opinions and views. And
No.
I would say I think it's always interesting, too, with anybody, in seriousness, but every time I talk, whether it's on TV, podcast, radio, whatever, people really hear what they want to hear. And they might hear one sentence, and that sets them off. They may not hear the rest of the next 16 sentences I say or 16 paragraphs I say because they're busy writing something in Twitter they're mad or they're yelling at their friend that I don't know what I'm talking about. Why I say this is, if you recall from our conversation, I said whoever wins that Gonzaga-Florida State game, so I thought Florida State gets the Sweet 16, is going to go to the Final Four.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how that's hating on the team we're talking about if you think they could beat a 1 seed and then go on to play in the Final Four. If you're mad about where you were seated in that whole conversation, that's fine. And clearly you didn't listen to anything I said. But listen to what I think about the team and the quality of the team and the uniqueness of that squad that we try to prepare for them. It's really difficult. And they're going to give Gonzaga everything they can take. And as I just said and said last week, whoever wins that game, in my mind, is going to Minneapolis.
Well, here's what bothered them was the fact that you had said in the midst of your 16-minute conversation interview with me that you thought that the SEC was better than the ACC, which if it was football, we would begrudgingly maybe accept that in some circles. But if we're going to rally around anything at Florida State, the ACC doesn't give us a lot of love. We're a redheaded stepchild even within this conference. But gosh darn it, it's the best basketball conference in the nation, Dalen, right? You want to change your thoughts on that?
No, this is my issue. Here's the thing. We can't just rely on that year in and year out. Most years, the ACC is the best conference in college basketball. The problem this year, as I reiterate, the bottom 6 teams were not any good. You had wins, almost guaranteed wins against Boston College, Notre Dame, Wake Forest, Pittsburgh. You can go down the list, and then you add in the teams on the back end that got some wins in the middle of the pack. North Carolina State didn't beat anybody in the top 6. They only beat teams in the bottom half. Clemson, same way. So you're looking at teams that are beating up the bottom pack of the back of the conference to make some of the records look good. It's just not the case. Now, is it the ACC have the most? Is it the hardest conference at the top? Yes. There are 4, 5, 6 teams in there that are really, really good teams. 3 of them can win the national championship. That is by far more than any other conference. But the SEC had one real bottom feeder in Vanderbilt that was non-competitive after they lost to Tennessee in overtime, mind you. They really struggled. The SEC's middle of their tier was better than the ACC middle tier, and their back of the tier was better than the back of the tier for the ACC. That is an abnormal situation. That's not normal, but that doesn't take anything away from what Florida State accomplished, especially when the last team they lost to was North Carolina over the course of 3 months. They've taken care of their business, and they've beaten some really good teams in the process. It's just the overall entirety of the ACC is not as good as it normally is. Those teams, Notre Dame is usually better. Wake Forest has had good years in recent years. Clemson has been better in recent years. North Carolina State was better last year. You can run down the list. That any coach will tell you. Georgia Tech has been better 2 years ago than they were this year. But that's not the case this year.
Real quick, that I think, and I am a University of Georgia alum, I would call them a bottom feeder. And I can't believe Anthony Edwards is going to Georgia.
That's my guy, Tom Crean, though. He's going to turn that program around. He's going
to
do it the right way.
Of course, yeah.
And he's
going
to find a way to make them better because they have that recruiting base in Atlanta. And if you can get those dudes, you got yourself a squad.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable when you look at Florida State. And I know that's not what we're talking about right here is this specific topic, but Florida State has done incredibly well in the state of Georgia recruiting. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to dry up because they got some really good connections up there, but it is obviously going to get harder with a guy up there that can recruit like Tom Crean can because, MJ Walker, Phil Kofer, Chris Singleton. I mean, you go down the line, they've gotten a lot of really good players from Georgia.
You're right. But those are both really good coaches. I think Leonard has established himself, obviously, not think he has. He's established himself as such an outstanding coach, in not just the conference, but in the country. Guys want to come play for him. And guys have seen now, too, that when you go play there and play in the style, when you're playing 8, 9, 10, 11 deep, you may not get the numbers, you may not get the minutes at other programs, you can still go be a pro. You can have a really good college career. You can leave early like Jonathan Isaac. You can stay more years and have a great career and go be a pro. He's bucked that maybe concern some younger players have. And those guys, too, I think they go there and they learn a little bit about being selfless, team first, family first, and they learn how to be a really good basketball player on both ends of the court. And last but not least, this isn't just lip service. He produces really good men. Like he's making kids better men in the long run, and that helps you be a pro in the NBA because the NBA is a business. And when you go in and you're still and your mentality is still immature and you still act like a young man or a boy, that's not going to work. It helps you. Your maturity off the court and on the court are important, and he prepares you for it.
All right, let's look ahead. Let's talk about Thursday's tilt between Gonzaga, the number 1 seed. What you said is your national title pick at the beginning of the tournament, Dalen, but also you thought maybe perhaps the most ripe for an upset, and Florida State gets them. Gonzaga, this is me obviously doing some really just low-hanging fruit research. 4 guys on their team in the game against Baylor played 35 or more minutes. They only had 8 guys total that saw playing time, so I don't know how much of Gonzaga's mix of riding their horses, guys like Rui Hachimura, Brandon Clark, Norvell, and obviously Killian Tilly coming back from his injury. How much of what Gonzaga does and just having their core sort of talent guys, how much of that will maybe play into Florida State's favor because Florida State does have a deeper bench and does want to roll out mass substitutions and things like that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, their team is about 7 deep, 8 deep with Killian now back in it. The difference is all their guys that touch the floor can really hurt you offensively and defensively. Offensively in particular, that is kind of mirrored in Florida State. They don't usually see teams. There are many teams in basketball in the country that have 4, 5, 6 dudes that can hurt you on any night. Gonzaga has that, as do the Seminoles, and I do think they having more depth on the defensive side of the ball, that length, that athleticism. They're going to try to pick up Josh Perkins, I would think, 94 feet, and try to wear him down because he's really a key guy. Even though Geno Crandall's gotten much better off the bench, and Crandall is a grad transfer that can come in and score and hook guys up, Perkins played in the national title game just 2 years ago. He runs that team really well. He's selfless. He goes and makes big shots at big times, and he kind of gets everybody orchestrated where they need to be at the crucial parts of games. If you can get in him 94 feet, which I think Florida State will be able to do, and just wear him down over time, that could be a critical part of that game. Also, anytime you get Hachimura or Clark in particular in foul trouble, that team changes. Now, when you bring Killian Tilly on that's now healthy, that doesn't have as big a drop-off. Used to have Philippe Petrusev, the freshman, would come on. He's a good player, but he will be a really good player. But he's just not quite ready to have a big impact in big games consistently. So the depth, the length, the athleticism, and the potential of wearing guys down or getting guys in foul trouble could really play in Florida State's favor. And as I already said, and you mentioned there, Gonzaga, I thought, was the most ripe for the upset, but my championship pick, the most ripe for the upset because of the matchup, because of who Florida State is, not because of anything lacking what Gonzaga is. It's really because of how good the Noles are.
How different I know the Brandon Clark kid is a huge addition, but is that the biggest difference between the Gonzaga team that we saw last year and this year? And obviously it's a very big one, but otherwise, is it most of the? It seems like it's most of the same guys they played last year, with the exception of this freakazoid at 6'8".
Yeah, I mean, Clark is the biggest addition. I covered him when he was at San Jose State, and he was an all-league player in the Mountain West. I remember seeing him. First time I saw him on film, I was like, who is this guy? Because, I mean, he was a pogo stick. He was a little bit leaner, and he was getting the ball off the rim and just going. That team was terrible, but you could see how much he could play. And now Gonzaga, they are known for, and rightfully known for, in your transfer year, dudes really improve, whether it's Brandon Clark or Kelly Olynyk, or you could just run down a list of dudes that have gone there and in their redshirt year get a lot better. He's outstanding. And he'll affect the game on the defensive end. He's such a quick jumper, and a lightning quick second jump. He finishes efficiently around the rim, around you or through you or over you. But him, along with Rui Hachimura, is a totally different player, too. I mean, his level of confidence, his skill has developed. He can step out and knock down a three. His body has continued to develop. So he's a different player than you saw last year. And mentality-wise, he now knows he's one of the 5 or 10 best players in the country. You know, last year you just kind of saw the flashes of potential. This year he actually knows and plays like it a lot of time. Zach Norvell Jr. was a freshman last year, sophomore this year. Much different mentality, much different comfort level, especially in big moments. Corey Kispert the same way. So this team is very different. And obviously, Florida State beat them last year without Killian Tilly, who was injured. Now, the easiest way for me to sum up your question, actually, is Tilly last year was arguably their best player when they would have met in the tournament. He couldn't play. This year, he's probably their 4th, 5th, or 6th best player. He is not required for them to succeed. He is a massive added bonus, but for him, if he can't play or doesn't play, this team is still capable of beating anybody in the country. And they showed it in November beating Duke. Now, I know that was a while ago, but they still have all these pieces that themselves have gotten better as well on both ends of the floor, and you add Tilly to the mix. So this team is very different than the team that Florida State saw last year. Now, Florida State's a lot of the same guys, but so many of those guys are better, and guys that weren't there are impact players. So this, I mean, we know we saw this matchup last year, but I think both these teams, the names on the front of the jersey are the same, but the team makeup is different.
Dalen Cuff, ESPN college basketball analyst, joining us here on Wake Up War Chant. Dalen, I want to ask you about just back to the sort of conference thing, and I know ACC may be a little more top-heavy this year, but the fact that Gonzaga...
Hold on, real quick. Why do people care so much to rep their conference?
Dude.
The Florida State's one of the 12 best teams in the country. Who cares what league they're in?
Dalen, you're preaching to the choir here. We're not conference guys on the show, but it's part of the tribalism of college sports these days, man. It's just part of it. The ACC network
I do make a point of making fun of Cannell every time I come on with him about trolling the SEC, because he's so blade with it, Danny Cannell, that it's become comical. And I love messing with him about it. But, I mean, he does believe it, but he is a troll amongst trolls when it comes to the SEC fans.
Yeah, well, they love him.
He made his career doing that. I mean, I shouldn't say that. He was going to get to where he was going to get anyway, but that's where he became – he'd go on Feinbaum and just rip the SEC, and he was the one guy on ESPN. The perception was he was the one guy on ESPN that would say, oh, this SEC stuff is nuts. And then that became like his I don't think shtick is correct because, like you said, I do think he really believes it. But it did become kind of a shtick, his just anti-SEC tweets and talking points all the time, which I'm all for it. I hope he does it till the day he dies.
Yeah, we don't necessarily like the SEC. But anyhow, my sort of question for you, Dalen, is the fact that I know they beat Duke, obviously. That's a huge, sort of pelt on their belt that Gonzaga has. But, the fact that Mark Few and Gonzaga, they've only made it past the Sweet 16 twice, how much of that is the fact that when you do come into the tournament, obviously this isn't the Big West. This is not the West Coast Conference anymore. 2 of their losses came to North Carolina and Tennessee, teams that are in the the Power 5, Power 6, however you want to identify it. How much of that is just lazy research on my part? How much of that is validity maybe in terms of Gonzaga being susceptible to an upset against a team that's like Florida State's caliber in terms of their talent and what Florida State's played against week in and week out leading up to this point?
Well, it's not lazy research. I think the conclusion is flawed. I think you go back and look at the information, but saying they lost to Tennessee or North Carolina, when you lose to some of those programs, like losing to North Carolina in almost any year is not bad. You're losing a blue blood program that has studs on it, stars on it, NBA players on it. So I think when you look at who they've lost to and where they've lost, they made it to the national championship 2 years ago. If you're extrapolating the Gonzaga from 10 or 12 years ago, it's even more different than it is right now. so that this program is essentially a power conference program. The investment, the charter flights, how they live, how they travel, players they get, the level of competition they play, who they play, and who they beat is commensurate with any of the top programs in the country right now. They may not have a history of North Carolina or Duke, but this program is at an elite level. And I wouldn't think that they don't care that team is from a Power 5 conference. It doesn't mean anything to them. I think when you get in the tournament and you get into the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, or in their case 2 years ago the championship game, you're playing really, really good teams. And you can lose to anybody. You're playing quality opponents with a one-and-done scenario, and you could get bounced. And I don't think it has anything to do with what conference they play in, because they're not underperforming when they get in the tournament most years comparative to other teams that are of the top conferences that sometimes get bounced in the top 32. Duke's lost in the first round before in the last 10 years. I mean, things happen, and that's what happens in the NCAA tournament.
Dalen, do you think when you look at this game, I think a lot of teams maybe when they get to the Sweet 16 and they're facing a team like Gonzaga that's 32-3 or whatever they are, 31-3, and has been ranked number 1 multiple weeks this season and has this kind of a loaded roster, they might be maybe intimidated is not the right word because you play in the ACC, but they might wonder, okay, how good is this team? Are we sure we can compete with this team? How much of an edge would Florida State have in the fact that they know they can play with Gonzaga because they just did it last year, versus Gonzaga knowing what Florida State is it's a different team. I don't know if revenge is an issue when it comes to the Sweet 16. You're just trying to win. But that has to be an extra edge for Gonzaga too, right? Because of how their season ended last year, that they get another chance at the guys that ended their season.
Yeah, there's something to that. I think guys might be a little more pumped to have a chance to rectify that. But you're right. I mean, more importantly, though, it's the Sweet 16. You're here to try to play for a championship. Doesn't matter if they entered season last year or not. Like, you got to want to win this game. And both teams do want to win this game. And as far as respecting each other, I mean, both these coaches are great, as I've already said, and they're going to throw on the film. And there's almost nothing. There's no easier scouting report than just showing guys film and guys being like, man, these guys can hoop. And that's what you're getting from both these teams. A lot of times coaches, when you know that your opponent is inferior, how you cut the edit a certain way. You want to make sure you're showing these great plays and this player plays best and this guy can do this, and really instilling a threat and concern in your players if you know and they know this team is inferior to them. There's not the situation here. I think both these teams have the utmost respect for each other, and Florida State's not going to be scared at all, as you said. That now this is where you do play in the ACC matters. You play UNC and Duke every year in Virginia. There's literally no team that's going to concern you at all. And for Gonzaga, it's kind of the same thing the other way. You've played all the big boys in any non-conference you can. You're willing to play anybody. You have been ranked number 1. There's no lack of respect, but you're not fearing Florida State just like you don't fear anybody. I think both these teams respect each other, have really great players, are going to put forth a fantastic game.
How big a loss do you think Phil Kofer is? Trying to defend more than anything, trying to defend the guys.
It's important just because, obviously, again, we said so many guys can hurt you on Florida State, but he's arguably their most just all-around talented player that can affect the game on both ends and at multiple levels, especially on the offensive end. So when you take that threat away, that is losing up another piece that can go off, and he might be the top of the scouting report. When you take a guy at the top of your scouting report, another guy gets more attention. So does Kabengele get more attention now than he would have not gotten if Phil's on the floor? So, that does factor in. That's important. I think anybody, looking at Florida State or when they win or lose this game, Phil not playing in the game deserves mention, win or lose. If they win without him, all the more impressive. If they lose, there is that caveat that they didn't play without Phil, just like I said about Killian Tilly earlier in this conversation with Gonzaga last year, because those things matter when the guys are that good and can be that impactful. Now, Florida State has proven all year they have guys that can make up for him. They are so deep. I've said so many times, they probably have more guys that can hurt you than any team in the country. But when you lose a guy of his caliber at this level, at this stage, when you're playing the other top 4, 5, 6 best teams in the country, you really want to have your entire arsenal at your disposal. And unfortunately, for Leonard Hamilton, he doesn't. But like I said before, it doesn't mean they can't win. I think this is going to be a really, really tight game, maybe a one-possession game at the end.
I was going to ask you about if there's any carryover between the scouting report of stopping John Morant and Murray State and Gonzaga, but just Gonzaga's got way more depth and talent to do what Florida State did in terms of shutting everybody else down and letting Morant go off, right? Like They can't just be like, all right, well, let Rui Hachimura go nuts and we'll just shut everybody down. Like, that's way easier said than done, right?
It's true, and it's a way different team because, I mean, Morant uses something like 57% of the possessions. His usage rate's the highest in the country. So really, if you take away his game, basically they said, well, maybe you can go score. We're not going to let you hook up your teammates. And that's when he can get deadly, when he gets his 20 points and his 10 assists. I think he only had 3 or 4 assists last game. So they really shut off the faucet to the other guys, did a great job of contesting some of their shooters. And after Morant hit a few threes, they adjusted a little bit, played him a little tighter, and they were fine, really. And they shot the ball well. Let's be real clear. Florida State makes threes like that, and they, offensive rebound against Gonzaga, which is one weak point. Gonzaga's defensive rebounding is not very good. And Florida State takes care of the ball. I mean, those 3 things, if they can shoot it well, which they did last week, if they can dominate the offensive glass, which they're capable of against the Gonzaga team, the Kendi lacks in that area, and Florida State takes care of the rock, that's kind of the recipe to win this game. And, of course, guys will make plays within that, but you got to do, I think, those 3 things importantly and keep Gonzaga out of transition to win that game. But those are all attainable goals.
Corey, you got anything else for my guy?
No, I just wanted to say it was. I wanted to speak for the entire fan base and say that I'm happy we got a second taste.
Good. I hope your fan base enjoyed the second time around, and feel free to come at me on Twitter. I'm sure there was something I said in here they didn't like as well, which is okay. That's part of this. That's what the fun of the NCAA tournament is. The fun of any sport is everybody's got different opinions, different views, and feel free to express them.
Dalen, real quick, would you rather do the national title game as a color analyst with Jim Nantz doing the play-by-play, or would you rather be the play-by-play guy, but your color analysts have to be Dick Vitale and Bill Walton?
Is that really a question? I mean, I want to get a word in edgewise, so it's definitely not going to be the play-by-play role with that setup. But I would, there would definitely be Nance, the consummate pro, and let me do my thing in the analyst role is definitely the choice between those two. It's actually a pretty easy would you rather. No offense to Hall of Famers. They just, I'm basically not there then.
All right, man. I think soon enough it'll happen, man. We thank you and appreciate your time. Dalen Cuff from ESPN, man. Thanks, bud.
All right, fellas.
Thank you,
anytime, guys.
3-2. All right, there we go. We're back. Thanks again to Dalen Cuff. Sorry I didn't go at him with I didn't use any daggers on him. Sorry I didn't go for the throat. I know him. He's my friend. Hopefully he paid his penance to you folks. Probably not, but that's the way the cookie crumbles.
I don't know. He talked up Leonard about not just making them good players, but making them good men.
Yeah.
Which is true. I mean, again, we always say we never really know who these people are, but that is important to Leonard Hamilton, that they do graduate and they do become good fathers, good husbands, all that. That really does matter to Leonard Hamilton. That's not, lip service.
I'd be heartbroken if any of those guys, I feel like I got a good enough read on them. Like, they all legitimately seem like good dudes. I'd be absolutely shocked if any of them, if I was stranded on the side of the road, I think they would all stop and help me change my tire. And not just because it's me. I think any of us. I think they're just good human beings. I will believe that.
Yeah, I agree with you, buddy.
I'll believe that. You mentioned it to him, and I guess it's worth talking about. Like, how much do you think of what Florida State was able to do last year to Xavier was because of what they experienced the year prior to that, and maybe the fear, the anxiety Florida State fans have that Gonzaga is going to come at Florida State with that sort of vengeance or that sort of determination and drive that Florida State had doled out to Xavier?
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that there's a bit to that, but it's not. It can't be a huge motivating factor because then you're concentrating on the wrong things. Like, that Xavier team was different than the one that Florida State had played the year before, and that Florida State team was certainly different. There was no XRM, there was no Isaac, there was no Bacon. So maybe I think it could work in reverse. Like, maybe Xavier took them a little too lightly because they had beat the tar out of them the year before when they were the 3 seed. When Florida State was the 3 seed. Now they're the 9 seed without the NBA guys. Okay, well, and once they got up by 12, they might have relaxed a little. Like, okay, they're better than we thought, but now we're up 12. We're running away with this thing. We'll be fine. And they kind of relaxed a little. Maybe that could happen for Florida State if they get up on Gonzaga again by 12 or 14 and think, okay, we're just going to do this again. Because it's not the same team. Like, he's right. Hachimura is better. And Hachimura was good in that game last year. I think he had 20 points. He was really impressive. And the Clark kid is obviously a huge difference maker. Then again, they didn't see this Kabengele, right? This Kabengele didn't exist last year. Terrence Mann was hurt. I mean, he played, but he wasn't healthy. So I don't know how much it will really factor in. It should certainly Gonzaga certainly will be taking Florida State seriously. I think they would have anyway. That dude's a great coach, and those are all really good players, and they must prepare really well because they always win their conference by going 18-0 or 17-1. So they take everybody pretty seriously, it would seem. So they weren't going to think of Florida a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament in the Sweet 16 lightly anyway. But maybe a little extra edge in practice and focus and preparation because of how it ended last year.
Yeah. Be sure to join us tomorrow. Irish O'Fell's in Anaheim. He'll give us the lowdown on Florida State after they have their shoot-around and their availability. They'll be doing that Wednesday, but we'll bring it to you on Thursday because that's the way these things kind of work. We'll be back at the football practice fields on Wednesday. Sorry about the curveball we threw you folks. There was no practice on Monday. We totally screwed up your entire week, Corey, by having you come down here. There was nothing going on. You just got to hang out in God's country, though. That's always good.
Yeah, it was a little disappointing to find that out on Sunday night as I'm 2 hours into my drive. That hopefully Brady and Shannon won't listen to this, but that I probably could have and should have stayed up in Georgia for a couple extra days. It's kind of a bummer, but what are you going to do? I blame myself. It was right there in the email. Just didn't read it. I thought you were going to ask me about what a true fan is.
I am. I'm trying to segue into that sort of stuff. Anyhow, so there will be practice.
I stepped all over you.
On Wednesday. Corey and I will be there observing. We can actually observe this day. Wednesday is a day of observance, so we'll be out there observing, talking to players. And there's two things that we kind of released or posted in the last 2 days since we've caught up that I just right now, and we're going to talk about this between now and the Boise State game, is just the way this fan base reacts to everything. I don't even know what this. I wonder what the split is in terms of just pissed off and patient, and what's in between it. What's if we had a pie chart, like how does that all look? Whose voice matters the most? Because, for example, Willie Taggart had his talk show. I think it's just called the Willie Taggart Talk Show now. It's not a call-in show because there's no phone calls. And he said on the show, and this is on our Twitter account, War Chant. Follow us on social media, War Chant. Follow Corey and myself. Subscribe to the podcast, unsubscribe, and then resubscribe. Give it 5 stars. Leave a nice review. Willie Taggart says one of the issues that hurt FSU last year was the, quote, trust factor as a result of the former head coach leaving. Said that hurt the players, and new coaches didn't see that until the season started. Says that's in the past now. Now, there was 348 likes, which I guess you would say those are people that agree with that sentiment, feel that's a valid observation. But there was probably about 15 or 20 replies, and a lot of them were less sympathetic. Don't blame others. The coaching last year was pathetic. Another person, Taggart can give them a pillow to cry in. Maybe that will help. Another person, next will be the sun was in their eyes, etc., etc. So they're obviously the PO'd part of the fan base. But 348 people liked it. A former player actually, I think, tweeted a violin emoji, but then later deleted it. I just like
okay, that's
where are we right now? Like, what is the state of the Seminole Union right now? Do you think, Corey? Like, who do you listen to? Who do you think? What gauges your sort of who's the wind vein of Florida State fans right now? Is it War Chant? Is it Twitter? Is it neither? Like, and how much you put stock in the way that people respond to this, the Chaz Neal story. People are all psyched about Chaz Neal. Some people say pump your brakes on Chaz Neal. It's a really weird time right now, I feel, to maybe not only be a Florida State fan, but also be covering the team because you don't know what to expect when you publish anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think it's just kind of it's how fandom is. It's certainly not specific to Florida State. I'm sure. 3 years ago, Florida fans, when they talked about McElwain, were like, yeah, I'm sure there were some that like, oh, what are you talking about? He just got us to the SEC championship game. And there were others that were, rightly pessimistic about the way the offense looked and the way the program was run, and they turned out to be correct. This, we just don't know. We don't have enough information, but I get it, man. Again, there's nothing that can be said or done, and we said it and we keep saying it until September. Everything else, everything is going to be met with eye rolls because that's what happens when you go 12-13 over a 2-year stretch. This program is used to losing now, which we know. I couldn't have fathomed that 5 or 6 years ago. They're an average program. They're not even great. They're not even good in the ACC. So when I can understand why people would be like, all right, man, at some point you have to own up to the mistakes you made. That's the perception. Obviously he has and will continue to do so. He has admitted, repeatedly some things he did that weren't right. And we've certainly taken him to task for some of the things he did in the offseason and then obviously during the season that in hindsight weren't great. But isn't that kind of how it works? Like, I think right now after a year, most people believe there's a chance. I think going into last year, 99% of the fan base believed this was the guy. I don't think a huge percentage of the fan base has completely written him off. I just don't think so. Not from my interactions, not just on the internet or social media, but just talking to fans and talking to people around the program, talking to people that really are diehard fans and boosters. They haven't jumped ship completely, but they're kind of looking for the railing a little bit.
Right.
Maybe to see, they're trying to walk towards it. But that's why this season is so important. But, there's nothing that can be said. It was an awful season in almost every way imaginable. And I can understand why a fan who already doesn't like him and thinks he was a bad hire, hearing that and saying, all right, man, what else? With the sun in their eyes, what's it going to be next year? What's going to be? It's just excuse after excuse after excuse. How about saying, I didn't do a good job? All that. I get it. But nobody's going to be happy after a 5-7 season. And it would be kind of weird for people to be blindly loyal to this coaching staff and have complete confidence in them to turn it around because they've never seen it done. They haven't seen this guy do it. We can point out what he did at South Florida, but they didn't live that. So in South Florida isn't Florida State. So there's no guarantee it's going to happen. So I get it. It's trepidation, right?
Yeah, it's just it's just so weird because, man, and I got unplugged from it. It's like going on War Chant, going on the message board sometimes. Like you get this whole, I don't know, it's just such a tug of war going on in every single thread, and people just clinging on the one thing to prove their point and trying to hammer it home. Like, see, we told you this was right. Oh no, you're wrong. And it's like it's March. Just take it for what it's worth. It's spring football right now. But I mean, we can't say that because, if we wait till September, then we're going to be out of jobs. Because if we don't talk about football for 5 months, that's going to be really boring.
All right about it. But nobody knows anything. It's a year. Nobody knows anything after a year. I am actually writing a story that by the time this is published, it will be on War Chant about all the tweets I got about Leonard Hamilton 3 years ago. And I'm not writing it like making fun of these people because I wrote stuff that, looking back in hindsight about Leonard Hamilton's tenure, like, yeesh. Like, I was a prisoner of the moment, too. So I'm not criticizing these people. I do think it's amusing, but nobody knows. There's so many. Fire Hamilton. He should have retired yesterday. This is the ceiling under Leonard Hamilton, a first-round exit. Never going to get to the tournament again. All this crazy stuff that was sent to me 3 or 4 years ago. But I don't blame them for it, right? Like, I don't think you would blame a Florida State football fan right now for being pessimistic about Willie Taggart. He hasn't given you anything to be optimistic about, but that doesn't mean he won't.
Yeah,
it was 1 year. It's just been a cavalcade of not great things that have happened to this program in the course of a year, but that doesn't mean it can't turn around. Florida State basketball turned around in almost an instant, and look where it is now. Yeah. And that's basketball at Florida State. Certainly football can be turned around quicker and to a sharper degree. You just hope he's the right guy. I find it odd. I think the craziest thing to me is the people that have completely written him off. That to me is bizarre because we just don't know. But it's such a small sample size. It's 1 year coming off a 7-6 season. He didn't take over the 2013 team and drive them into a mountain. He took over the 2017 team. Yeah. So it's odd for people to be so negative about what happened. But at the same time, because I love to speak out of both sides of my mouth, we all watched that season play out.
That's the thing.
It wasn't like they lost a bunch of close games.
They
got blown out.
Yeah, I mean, if all you have to judge is this one season, I find it like, how can you be like? I'm not saying don't be optimistic, but I just don't understand the need to be like a pig sniffing out truffles and like finding every negative, skeptical thing and then trying to call people out on things. It's like, man, there's 1 year of evidence, it was a very bad year. To your point, I don't like to say that he should be fired, writing him off, I think is way premature. But to like bang this sort of drum, like, I can't believe you're being this, unreasonable. How dare you think this way? It's like, dude, they're like, everyone knows he makes his biggest jump in year 2. It's like, well, I mean, if you go look and see what he did like year 2 at Western Kentucky and South Florida, that probably won't get people that much more jazzed up going into 2020. But the one thing I wanted to mention before we do leave is to the point of what he was trying to make on his show, saying that the trust factor affected the players. They didn't see it until the season started. I think it speaks to a larger point about I think he really values or sees the impact of, and he mentioned it in a story he told players at Madison High School, or is it Madison High School, the one that Travis Jay's from?
Yeah, Madison County. Yeah.
Madison County. About him and his teammates when he was playing football, loving their coaches so much that so much of what they were able to do was wanting to make their coaches proud, wanting to make their coaches happy. This is such a big deal for him. And I'm not talking about him being a friend, but I think strategy X's and O's, I think is almost to him a less of an issue or a need to fix than it is healing. Like the emotional aspect, the psychological aspect of being in a team and executing your job. And to me, that feels like it's almost the complete antithesis of what Jimbo was. Like, yeah, Jimbo loved you guys or whatever, but Jimbo was like, focus on execution, strategy, your keys. With him, it's like, man, I just need y'all to believe in what I'm doing, love me the way I love you, and then we're going to go to the top. And to me, it's like a bizarre sort of philosophy to have. Not a right or wrong thing. I think Dabo, to a large degree, that's what he's tried to establish. Right. I just, how much time do you get to bang that drum and to hold that as being the most paramount issue for a program? Because I really think it is, man. His whole thing is these guys, if they believe me, if they trust in me, will play their hearts out, and that's what's going to turn this thing around. Not, even though he invested $1 million in an offensive coordinator that's going to call plays. None of that. That's secondary. It's getting these guys to all believe and love each other and trust in one another. Which
and what's interesting about that is, number one, I do think Dabo is the blueprint for that. Just like Nick Saban was the blueprint for Jimbo's philosophy when it comes to a program. I think Willie really is trying to take what Dabo's doing at Clemson, and we can. I mean, I agree with that sentiment. Like those guys love that dude and play really hard for him almost all the time, and will come back to school even when they shouldn't, because they love that place and they love playing for that program. So that is something that I do think matters. And I do think, when we talk about the team that we're talking about the most this show, the basketball team, I mean, I think that plays a huge part in their success.
Oh, yeah.
Is how they all buy in. And I don't know if so much they want to win for Leonard Hamilton. I think they all really like the guy a lot, and he means a lot to them. But that they want to win for each other. That's a big deal when you can get a team that's like that. And I think that's what Willie's trying to point towards. So I get it. I get that that's a talking point, and I get that that's something he really feels. You also can't have 10 men on a field on a punt. Like, I don't care how much they love you, Willie. Get all 11 guys out there.
Yeah. Like,
get 11 guys that love you to be on the field for a punt return or to block or when you're trying to punt. Or get a guy that loves you not to bring the ball out of the end zone when it's 6 yards deep and you never return it past the 15, or not to block in the back. That's the cynical side that I think a lot of Florida State fans have right now. But I do think Willie Taggart wants to build a program in the image of Clemson. I know that's weird for Florida State fans to hear, but Clemson's won 2 national championships in 3 years now. They're the top of the mountain. Try to do it that way. I get why he's doing that. I think that's what he truly believes. And, I don't know how much trust played a part in all the mistakes and all the awful losses they had last year, but, we'll see. I mean, again, show me in September.
Yeah. I mean, and then just to wrap that whole thought up, I think the Kendall Browse hire, again, I think is sort of like the stopgap to stem the tide, get this thing turned around, at least into that 8-9 win direction, maybe 10 wins, and I don't have a job anymore. And then, like, Willie's going to focus on, like the human resource aspect of this whole thing, and then get the guys that he needs in here that he thinks are going to play their hearts out, right? He's the guy that talks about, when they ask him about recruiting and then the guys that they've recruited and they've signed, he's a football player. He just loves playing football. Like, and even though they're a 3-star guy or somebody that you don't think is highly recruited enough or highly ranked enough, like Taggart sees the intrinsic value that kid has for football and that drive. So, yeah.
You know what he wants? He wants a bunch of, and again, I'm equating it to a completely different sport. He wants a bunch of Terrence Manns and Trent Forrests. I don't know that either one of those guys will play in the NBA. I hope they do. But they are terrific college basketball players that are completely unselfish and play really hard all the time, play through injury, play as hard as they possibly can, and they love their program and they love their coaches. And that's what you need. That's what Willie wants, is those kind of guys. The Jaden Large Woodbees of the world, I think, is who he those are the kind of guys he wants to build the program around. And, it's easier to do with a basketball team because you only got 12 dudes instead of 85. I get it. But, the Trent Forrest and the Terrence Manns that are straight up 4-year Florida State players, good players, all bordering on great college basketball players, at least very good college basketball players. But don't, they're not one and done freaks, but they're how you build a program. Those kind of guys you have to have talent, number one. That's the most important thing. But after that, if you have a mindset that buys into the program and buys into the unselfish spirit that the coaches are trying to create, in the love and brotherhood and all those things that sound like cliches, and maybe they are, but they're not a cliche in Clemson's case. That matters, man. They just love that place. They love, and if you could get Florida State to be like that again, or, I don't know if they were ever like that with Jimbo. It was a different kind of domination that they had, different kind of player maybe, but that's what he's aiming for. So again, I get it, but I also get the cynical side, because you're right. That's the funny thing, is that these people speak in such absolutes one way or the other, and they're both wrong. Or let me put it this way. Neither one has any idea if they're right or not. Yeah. The people that have written them off that say he can never win here, well, you don't know that. You might have been the same people that were saying that Leonard Hamilton could never get to a Sweet 16 or never get to an NCAA tournament. After 6 years, he had not been in the NCAA tournament. Well, now he's been there 7 times in 10 years and 3 Sweet 16s. So you don't know that he can't get it done here. But the other people that jump on every negative complaint and say, give him time, he's going to turn it around, he's done it here. Well, you don't know that he can do it at Florida State either. You know what we're in, Aslan? We're in a wait-and-see mode.
Oh, okay. The wait.
I just coined that.
Yeah, I like that. Put up
wait and see. It's hyphenated. It's wait -and -see.
Gotcha.
Wait and see mode.
All right. Yeah. Again, let's get out of here. But I was as skeptical and negative, and as much as you guys hate me, if we were doing this show in 2011, coming off the 3rd straight loss, was it Wake Forest the 3rd straight loss that year?
Oh yeah.
Man, I'd be like, screw Jimbo. I want to say screw Jimbo. I like Jimbo, but I'd be like, I don't think he's ever going to win a national title here. I would have said that.
Well, that's a much better example than even my Leonard Hamilton one. You're right. Yeah. 2012, everybody thought that. I mean, people, even ESPN columnists were writing Florida State bumped their head on the ceiling with the win over Northern Illinois in the Orange Bowl. There were people that thought after the NC State loss, screw this guy. He is never going to get. And that was his 3rd year, and they were number 6 in the country.
Yeah.
And they are 3. They might have been 3 when they lost that game.
I think so.
But there was such venom and vitriol for Jimbo after that loss, with good reason. But when you took a step back, you realized, okay, well, he did have them ranked number 3 in the nation for the first time in like a decade. Yeah. And it's only his 3rd year. It seems like the program's on the upswing. But yeah, there were people then that were 100% wrong about Jimbo Fisher. 100% wrong. Nobody knows. Yeah. Nobody knows. You'd like to see more signs, more positive signs moving forward. Yeah. Maybe that's it. Yeah. More positives, even if they only win 8 games, 7 or 8 games in 2019. If they just look better and you see some positivity moving forward, that would help things.
But you know what, Corey? Ultimately, I think we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think what we are, Aslan, I don't know if I've said this before, I think we're in a wait and see mode.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Perfect.
All right. The epitome of selflessness and team first, Ira Schafel. Again, he's in Anaheim. He'll be on the show tomorrow, breaking it down as the Noles get ready to take on Gonzaga. Thanks again to Dalen Cuff.
Yeah, hey, can I address something real quick? I think I speak for all. The way you talk about Ira is getting a little uncomfortable for me, because I feel like I mean, I feel like you like me, right? We're a good guy. Well, I'm a good guy. We get along well. We have a show together.
Yeah.
But you talk about him like he's a messiah. He ain't writing those checks. You know what I'm saying?
But like, people don't understand. He drove to Jacksonville to fly to Hartford, and then was there for 4 or 5 nights, and then flew back to Jacksonville and hauled or rear end.
Sunday morning. His flight on Sunday morning was at 6 a.m. He didn't even go to bed Saturday night.
Yeah. Hauled it back to Tallahassee so that he could go and cover spring football practice on Monday. But plot twist, there was no practice on Monday. And then he's got to turn around and get on a plane and go to Anaheim.
I know. Here's what I believe. I think you probably do. Like, you know, no offense to Ira, but I think you'd rather hang out with me and get a beer with me maybe over Ira. But it's palpable how much more you respect Ira than me.
Yeah, it's like my head coach. You know, I want my head coach.
I'm your recruiter. I'm the tight ends coach.
Yeah, bingo.
Okay, that's fair. I can live with that.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening again. Thanks to Dalen Cuff from ESPN. Thanks to Corey as always. Corey, I mean, this show, I can't even imagine how horrible it'd be if you weren't here. You're the light of my life in this show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Aslan, and you're correct on all accounts.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.